Welcome back to another Purpose Served podcast episode. I'm your legendary host, Darren Wingfield. Thank y'all for tuning in. Who's been tuning in for a while now? And if you're new to this podcast is simply about inspiring you to be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be through acts of service, through you doing it in a meaningful way. And today, I'm going to talk about criticism and different approaches to facing criticism. Now, one individual, there's two people that I'm going to be using as an example of this today. And one of them I talked about in the past. The other one is new. And that's a part of the World of Purpose series, the 10 individuals, and that being Isaac Newton and the other person being Malcolm X. Two people that is fairly well known in history and for ultimately two different things. And one handled criticism extremely well and the other one didn't. One of them handled criticism in a way that they was going to face it for what it was, and the other person didn't like the criticism and decided to isolate themselves. But it doesn't necessarily take away the greatness between the two. And the relatability in this is that we're either one of the two people. And I find myself personally out falling between the lines of both of them. There's times when criticism come my way and I do remove myself from the criticism, but then there's other times when I face the criticism for what it is and don't shy away from it. But a lot of people avoid doing things in the first place to avoid being criticized and having judgment getting put on them, and that halts them in the long run from never living up to their potential. Now, Isaac Newton didn't like being criticized. Was a part of, like, if you are involved in a form of education, which is expression through a knowledge acquirement in that sort of field, you gonna have your colleagues. You want to need peer reviews. People gonna look over your papers. Now, this is not me being a subject matter expert in these things because I'm far from one. But I know that's the name of the game when you are on that type of level. Especially if you are the type of person that's coming up with new discoveries, just like with Isaac Newton coming up with a whole bunch of new discoveries by the age of him turning like 26, which is insane. That's a crazy young age. And the interesting thing with Malcolm X and his story is the criticism that he faced from all angles and sides pretty much his whole entire life. Especially once he joined the Nation of Islam and the internal conflict that came through the NOI, and also what he was facing outside of that with the government and people in general. Now, focusing first on Malcolm X, it's insane the fortitude and the courage that this dude had and the perseverance that this dude had, knowing that his life was on the line like every single second, every single minute. Paranoid dude. Extremely paranoid. If you ever was to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which is a great read, you would see that the interviewer, like, when he would walk into the hotel room, he'd check under the lamp, he'd check under the table, he'd check like the couch cushions and stuff like that to see if it was tapped for wires, check the phones and stuff like that, because that's the life that he was living. He was a highly watched dude, especially by the government. And one of the pivotal moments that he had was coming back from Mecca after he went on his, pretty much his African tour and went on that great pilgrimage to Mecca. He discovered a lot of truths about the world that was bigger than what he was going through in the country itself. And the criticism that he faced coming back, it was almost as if he had a radical shift And it went from the stance of course, fighting for like black people and those rights that, you know, if it wasn't for people pioneering like him back in those times, who knows where um me being a African American man myself, like who knows where I would be in a country like this. Just being flat out honest, and that's a fight that we've soon forgot. But I'm drifting off the point a little bit, to be quite honest. But there was an interview that he was on when he first came back, and the questions that first off that he was dealing with, especially being a part of Islam and being a Muslim brother, is that compared to Christianity around that time, with Martin Luther King being the spearhead for that movement, was nonviolence and integration. And what he stood for and the Nation of Islam stood for around that time was separation, completely separating from white people in general, not want to do business with them and all of that. And this is speaking from me being myself and my faith. I'm a Christian by faith, but there was a lot of points that for me I resonated with. And I always go back to listening to interviews from him, and this is what kind of inspired this podcast episode. And he ultimately, in the face of fear, he looked fear and death square in the eyes. And even though he was scared, it wasn't going to stop him from doing what he had to do. And the one thing that he realized is a lot of the beliefs and the foundations and the things that he stood on, they were wrong. Once he went to Mecca, he seen people that not only was black, but they were white. They were Asian. They were from the Middle East. They were from everywhere. And then he recognized something, that it wasn't a black problem. It was a humanity problem that he was dealing with, which was huge. And I can't imagine, me personally speaking, the psychological distress of having that sort of epiphany, and especially the influence and power that you hold over a certain group of people in a country, in a nation, in a whole, in its whole. But ultimately speaking, based off of his own beliefs and what he decided to stand on, it ultimately got him assassinated. The worst way. At a hall, I believe in Harlem. He was shot multiple times in front of his wife, in front of his kids, brutally murdered, in front of assembly. And he always had premonitions of his death, so he knew that his time was coming, and he wasn't home for long. Once he came back, it was in between, I would want to say 3 weeks to a month, I believe, when he came back and they assassinated him. On the opposite, I guess, end of that is dealing with Isaac Newton and his colleagues. He didn't like being criticized for his work, but yet and still his work was pivotal in the development for a bunch of things. And his discoveries on light and optics and the colors of the rainbow all range from a breakdown of white light, the laws of motion, his discovery of gravity, and all of these discoveries that he made was him isolating himself from the world. And his biggest discoveries that he made was during a quarantine, which is insane. And due to his religious beliefs, he had to pretty much hide himself his true self from the academic world and the religious world, because at the time he didn't believe in the Trinity. And what the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But he did believe in God, and he was a Christian by faith. And ultimately, the one thing that's interesting about Isaac Newton is he wrote way more and studied way more on religion and theology than he did on science. So a lot of the things that he discovered came from trying to understand the workings of God and the mind of God, which is extremely interesting. And back then, if you didn't align to the church beliefs, this was enough to get you excommunicado. And not only that, this is also enough to get you the death penalty and get you out of here and get you killed. And he was in a position of power, pristine power. But it didn't always start off like that. Isaac Newton had rough upbringings, just like Malcolm X. I believe Malcolm X's father was murdered at a young age. And I believe that with Isaac Newton, his father wasn't in the equation at all. And his mom ended up remarrying somebody. And this, I guess, forced him to live a life on a farm. And that wasn't something that he was willing to do. And ultimately, when it was time for him to further his education, he had to pretty much pay his own way through college and higher levels of attainment through pretty much busting tables and all of that. So this is somebody that fought very hard to get everything that he ended up getting. And he was somewhat of a humble guy about it all. So both of these individuals face criticism pretty much their whole entire life, especially in the worlds that they was walking into. In regards of Malcolm X, if you are fighting for civil rights, you will be facing criticism. And in the world of science, you will be facing criticism in that regard too. And I can't imagine, honestly, it's easier to make discoveries now due to the fact of all the technology that we have. But imagine back in the 1700s and you figuring out all these things that's going on in the universe. How are planets moving the way that they're moving? Why does things fall down to the ground if you throw, for example, a ball across the room? What is that force that's bringing it down to the ground instead of having it go straight forward no matter what? These intuitive questions was things that deeply intrigued them. And of course, when you bring in these big ideas, once you solve these problems into the world, and especially if they are new and they have to be tested by others, criticism comes with it. The reason why I bring this up, like I said earlier, is just that a lot of us avoid these type of criticisms in our life. And we have to go into these directions in order to honestly find ourselves and be who we are truly meant to be who we are truly destined to be. And we let the opinions of other people slow us down and hinder our growth, hinder our uniqueness, and hinder the potential that we have to bring into this world. And that's what comes with facing the darkness. That's truly what comes with it. And you shouldn't be shying away from this at all. Majority of people do. And do you want to blend in with the crowd, or do you want to be known for something that's truly powerful and moves people? These two people that I just named changed the way that society and culture was going in, still to this day. And like I said, around the time, going back to Malcolm X, and keep jumping back and forth, but around that time, blacks was considered 3/5 of a person, and we was just getting out of the Jim Crow era, which we have forgot that fight. The one thing that I was looking at also, and I was writing on this. In fact, I'm going to read you guys exactly what I wrote. Let's get it. We can say that anything and everything is undergoing some kind of transformation. Within this act of transformation, whatever the object of subject is, it is either being developed towards better usage and efficiency or becoming obsolete and useless. Time reveals which is the prevailing truth. In fact, these go hand in hand with each other and can be observed in forms like art, education, and the environment, etc. Transition periods causes this to happen. The genre of rap is a perfect example of that. When this art form came into being, it was in the 1970s/80s, which represented the culture of the youth in the inner city. The combination of other functions outside of music added on to its vibrancy, and that being dance, spray painting, and fashion. This is a new way at the time for the youth to be able to express themselves. Even though each one of these functions/forms can be looked at individually, they still fit into a bigger picture when it's all said and done. And we could trace this back all the way to the birth of civilization on the plains of Africa, where these forms was still present. Yet again, we see forms alluded to previously in our early history. The first primary form of expression was through the environment, and being able to adjust to the landscape was a matter of life and death. Using fire to cook was an essential discovery, and also the uniqueness of the use of tools allowed for more efficient ways to cultivate and subdue the land that was being dwelled in. The birthplace of culture lies in these truths and patents on the body, and piercings, and on cave walls, expanded communication skills in the act of storytelling. Storytelling allows for information to be passed down from generation to generation that may and can lead to increase in power, wealth, status, and most importantly, survival. The elements of rap started with these aspects and still remain at its core. In today's era of rap, a lot of the history is lost and forgotten, with remnants of its history hitting the samples. The genre is now dominated by topics such as violence, sex, and other things that plague the life of people who are able to strongly relate to its message. Acts of redemption and repentance is rarely mentioned, which can have detrimental effects. The reason why I started writing those things down is that over time, and it seemed like this pattern is all throughout, is just that people forget why certain things were created in the form of a certain thing and the purity of that thing being created. And it moves into a generation, it moves into a space where if it's not profitable, it becomes useless. And people are getting into certain forms due to the fact of what they can get out of it, rather than having a simple love and a passion for doing that thing. And these two people that I named, going off of criticism for a second, is that they truly cared about what they was doing. Isaac Newton truly cared about natural philosophy to the point that he dedicated his whole entire life in discovering more and more about the world that he was living in, to the point where he wasn't getting any sleep. The dude was barely sleeping. And he'd be working so hard that he'd forget to eat. He'd forget to sleep. And that was the same thing with Malcolm X on the opposite end of the spectrum. Is that that's how hard he was working and fighting for oppressed people. And towards the end of his life, he realized that it wasn't a matter of fighting for specific people, but people as a whole. And that he was a reflection of humanity itself. And with that type of mindset, if we all develop that type of mindset, we wouldn't be treating each other in a way that we are starting to treat each other. And this goes back, yet again, something I keep mentioning within the last couple of podcasts is the 2 commandments given by the Holy One. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. And when we look at ourselves as a reflection of humanity itself, we will begin to truly, truly, truly start living life in a totally different way. And we would start treating people in a different manner than what we're treating people as. And criticism would disappear. But in all reality, are we going to get there? No, I don't think so. At least not in my lifetime. Just to be a little pessimistic. But at the end of the day, that ripple effect is real, and you can play your part. And if you do what you have to do in regards to finding a form and living it out and getting to that destination, that'll be extremely, extremely, extremely important to your community and ultimately to the world around you. Something that I previously just put up on my Instagram. Go follow me on Instagram, purpose_served. But I talked about the concept of the roadmap and what you need with the roadmap, the requirements of it, and you need a vision. You need something from that unseen world, which is within yourself, that connects you to your thoughts and your feelings, and you need a form for that. And the form takes place through you acting on that vision, the thoughts, your dreams, your feelings, and putting that into some sort of form, which I named 6 of them earlier. And that's going to come through actions and deeds. But not only that, it's going to bring you to that third requirement, which is a destination, a place where the vision can be and be fully realized. Because just because you got something in your head, that doesn't mean that's how it's going to come out. 9.9 times out of 10, once you act on whatever it is in your head, you're going to realize that something do not match. And this comes with repetition. This comes with practice. This comes with discipline. And with that being said, once you do try to bring that form into being, you will face criticism. There's no avoiding that, to be quite honest. But put yourself out there. Put yourself out there. And the baseline to goals and living off a purpose is service. The act of doing something for other people. Don't be selfish. There's enough selfishness that's going on out here. And based off of what I just read, going back to that, and something that like I love listening to rap. I ain't even gonna lie to you. But I also see the transition of what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the direction that it's going in. It's destructive, and people are losing their lives behind it. There's real situations that people are rapping off of. In the next 24 hours, they're not here on this planet no more. Somebody took them out because of the things that they said and the things that they put out into the universe. If you check out the Chicago drill scene back 10 years ago, 2014, and the originators of that, a lot of those dudes is dead or in jail. And that movement right there spread throughout the whole entire country. And sparked a lot of deaths throughout the whole entire country, like as a whole. Which lets you know how strong of an influence that certain forms have. And that form, which is art, expression through creativity, took the function of music. And that's the vibes that people was putting out in the air, putting out into the world. Straight destruction, and they was getting it back. With the swiftness. So be mindful about what you're doing. Be mindful about how that's coming across and be intentional about the forms that you guys are taking. And like I said, you're meant to impact people, and you're doing that no matter what, whether you realize it or not. But that's all I gotta say. Thank you guys for listening to another Purpose Served podcast episode. Yeah. Please check out the Miro Whiteboard. Download the Miro app if you want to see a whole layout on a Purpose Served process on how do you go from ideas to results. It's free. Download the Miro app. It's World of Purpose. The link is going to be download in the description. We're adding slowly but surely onto the podcast. The website. And also, in futures notice, I'm looking for Purpose Served instructors in the forms that I've been naming pretty much throughout the whole entire podcast. And that being art, wellness, community, education, the environment, and fitness. And what I want to start setting up is, no matter where you at, if you are good at any of those things and you would like to teach a class and host a class and help people out in these particular forms and get people involved, please reach out to me. Go on the Purpose Served website, and the link to being a Purpose Served instructor will be also in the description below. I thank y'all. Until next time, serve your purpose.